Everyone is in attendance. And we have Seth? Brett, I'm sorry. Seth? Peter, oh my gosh, I didn't recognize you. Sorry, you look, you're without your sling, I'm missing you. All right. Minutes from last meeting, everybody get a chance to read them?
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Okay,
Second?
thank you. Approved. We're a little lax on Robert's rules because I don't remember them. And since we are only advisory and can't vote on anything and don't have any money to spend, the whole taking votes seems a little less than necessary most of the time. All right, let's, since these are, Seth, everybody know the Prospect Resource Commission here. Peter, Agnes, Seth, and Dana. They wanted to give a presentation today, and Dana has some personal business to attend to, so if you want to skip ahead and let them
That's fine.
go ahead, we'll get to the cleanup week later. Okay.
My name is Agnes Wojnarski, and this is Dana Sievertson and Peter Hahn and Seth Marcus. We're on the Prospect Heights Natural Resource Commission, and we thought this would be a great opportunity to be able to introduce ourselves and just meet everybody, because we really can't do that since we're a commission, you're a commission, we can't meet more than 2 at a time. So this way, we just wanted to sort of come here and just offer any services we could. So I know that you're doing so much and you're doing so many important things, especially in the floodplains and clearing like woody debris. And we've gotten, Jill listens to your meetings or attends them sometimes. So we're sort of, we know what's going on, and we just wanted to offer anything that you would like help or, anything at all, because I think some of the things we share, some of the common goals, and we, all love the environment. And so we wanted to offer our help for your cleanup too in April that you're having. So if you need any people, if you need any services, if you need anything like that from us, we're happy to help. In the future, if you have any projects and you need plants, we grow these plants. And not to purchase plants from us, we'd give you the plants, because this is all, we do it all for free. It's for the city, right? And it's for everything. So, I don't know, do you want to add?
Yeah, just for reference, we grow about 20 to 30,000 native plants every year in the greenhouse program. All the seed comes from the remnant prairie, so everything is collected local. We're collecting now from our own restorations as well, so it gets local. So we have quite an abundance of plants. So we're totally happy to incorporate
and especially
those.
like long-rooted grasses, like prairie cordgrass and Indian grass. We have all of these grasses that if, I think you had talked about maybe at some point doing some shoreline stabilization. We're willing to just to do that. We have an auger too. So
also, because we do the journal and we do our workday notices and things like that, if you guys ever want to piggyback onto that, if you have articles that you'd like to incorporate in our journal, we have an email list of 300 people, so we're glad to do that. One of the suggestions that we talked about was for your cleanup day, since it's happening in our Earth Week, we always try to do a bunch of festivities. If you'd like to have us put that on the calendar, the journal's going to hopefully go out tonight.
Sure.
Yes.
I would absolutely like to put that in the journal, make it a date and make it official, that it's a joint.
So it goes to a wider audience, and so you
Right.
get a lot more participants.
Okay, I guess along the same line here, my question would be, how much exchange through your internet from the general society actually communicates or asks you questions? Because we're looking to, like you say, is to take this information, get it out to the public so that they understand what's going on and how to basically cooperate. So
We have a mailing list of,
It's 300 people, and it's made up of residents. It's a lot of the city officials are on there as well. Police chief, the park district, all those guys are in the mailing list. The feedback we get is good. We get questions back all the time at our
Okay.
info, phnrcinfo.com or info@phnrc.com. So, yeah, it's a really effective communication tool.
And we find when we have public events, like Fourth of July and others, hundreds of people come to our table and get information. There seems to be quite a bit of interest in the community.
Right, because, you know, the fact that your committee's been out there, and we're looking to get this information, basically, if it's funneled, you know, through your website, and people are emailing you or asking you questions, because when you're talking about grasses, and we're both talking about the same thing, preservation of whether it's the native species or preserving our banks and the flow of our channel and the water resources. So it's kind of a, you know, we're limited here as a commission. But you know, you're more established than what we are as far as communicating with the public.
We're certainly willing to share all that stuff with you
Share
guys
and help.
and help,
Definitely.
absolutely. One of the things we also do is we send out workday notices. So for instance, we work every other Sunday year-round, doesn't matter
Right.
what the weather is. So every 2 weeks, we send out a workday announcement, and it tells people when it is, what time it is, what we're going to be doing. And then we always do like kielbasa roats or you know, treats afterwards.
There's been such a special event workday notices too. So if
Right.
there's any special event that you're holding, we can send it even to our volunteers, and then you might get 5 people, you might get 10 people, you might get 15, whoever's off that day, whoever's available. And so that's another resource to be able to get people out for whatever.
But we, you know, when we do seed collection, for instance, we'll send out seed collection is on Wednesdays, and it starts late summer and goes through the fall. So we have special notices that go out for that. So special events, like if we have some work that's just really backed up and we got to get it done, we may do 2 work days. So we send out notices for all that stuff. When we're going to burn, we send out our burn notice with the schedule, when we're going to be burning, where we're going to be burning, all that stuff. So information is king. I mean, you can't communicate enough. And so that's sort of what we've always done.
Yep.
And then also on our website, we have archived now 5 years, believe it or not, of our journals.
Right.
That come out once a month, every month. So there's a lot of stuff to read there.
If I may jump in, and I thank you for coming tonight and kind of explaining a little bit more about what you do. I think we're all somewhat familiar with what we do, what you've been doing. The native plants and things that you're growing, are those conducive for growing along the ravine as well? And those will help long-rooted
Yes.
plants that will help with the stabilization?
Yes.
One of the things I wanted to mention is that we have experts who know about the different species, and some are better for plant stabilization, some have deep root systems that will help stabilize the plant, some are better for shade, some are better for sun, some are better for sandy soils, some are better for clay soils. So that can help to know what plants should go where.
Perfect.
And we've done a lot of experimentation with grasses, and then we work with the forest preserves and the Morton arboretum. So there's a lot of sort of combined knowledge, and especially for shoreline stabilization, there's a couple of really tough grasses that can do it. And a lot of people use them, like prairie
Yeah,
cord
we
grass
also-
is an example.
Like, we do trade-off things with, like Fermilab Natural Areas and the Poplar Creek guys. They'll come, you know, they bring us seed, we grow the seed for them because she's a wizard at doing that. And so in exchange, for instance, Fermilab lets us process all of our penstemon, which is incredibly difficult to process. So they have a mill, and we just dump it in and run it.
I'm sorry, I have penstemon coming up
A fox
out of
with
my
their tongue.
ears.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh,
I can
penstemon.
give you all the penstemon you want.
I used to do it by
Plugs,
hand.
plugs.
And then, like, for instance, Poplar Creek will, in exchange for that, they'll let us collect seed in the fall, and then they'll come out and help us transplant. So there'll be like 30 people show up.
They'll
and
transplant
they'll
all
do
the
nothing but
plants,
transplant.
and then
They'll-
all we have to
they'll-
do is water them.
They'll transplant like 15,000 plants in an afternoon, so.
And also with water rising in the creek, there's certain plants that can be managed through the high water and some others that can't. So it's
It can be
another thing.
inundated for several days, and those are the ones that can work more.
Yeah, because we really need to come up with an outline and a list of acceptable plants that that we can disseminate to the homeowners and say, you know, we're asking you to take care of your, you know, keep it clean. If you can't walk under it, trim it. And here's what you need to plant, or here's what you need to do to protect the stream.
We have a lot of resources for putting that information together. You know, one of the things we do at the block party, for instance, is we give away native plants, all right? So we give away a six-pack of native plants, and then there's a sheet that tells them everything about the plants that they're receiving. In exchange, people give us their email address, and so that's how we grow our email list.
Okay.
The real benefit is that we have more native plants out in
Everywhere.
the community, and so then, you know, you increase the insects and biodiversity, and, you know, just on and on and on and on. So there's all kinds of things like that that you can do, that we do, that we're glad to share and help, you know, just the more the merrier.
But sometimes it's hard to find these plants in nurseries too. And so, I mean, you know, we can't sell anything, and we grow everything, and we give it. I mean, it's part of the community, it's part of what we do, and to help. And so if, like, the landowners wanted to really plant cordgrass, I mean, we would be willing to give them cordgrass, because it would be hard for them to find that on their own.
And also when it comes to planting, you know, planting plugs, you know, we have an auger, so, you know, we can drill couple thousand holes in no time at all, and then, like, typically we use, like, kids, Prospect Heights, the kids program.
Kids Care, but that's a little
we have,
Well, we
we
have
work with
many
scouts.
organizations that will come out and
all the
plant
schools, and, you know, they'll come out and they'll plant all these plants, 2,000 plants in an hour, so, you know, there's lots of ways to do
a lot of resources
things.
that we'd like to share, because, you know.
Absolutely. And I,
Yeah,
Almost every reach of the creek is shade.
I know. It's,
Well, I was going to say, having walked with you, you know the creek very well, and it is very diverse, in which case it would be nice, you folks probably know it better than we do, which areas of the creek within Prospect Heights where you're able to do things that you do. I know in our area that's pretty difficult.
it is.
But in many different areas that I may not know as well or remember as well, there are many areas and homeowners that I know that could use what you have, depending on what the bank stabilization process is. And so you probably have along the creek the differences in the soils and the lands, and the height of the creek, and when it goes up fast and when it never comes down.
I think it can be difficult because some of the slopes are very
Steve?
Severe.
steep. And you really, for success, you need like a 3-to-1 slope. And in some places, that would require physically changing the slope, which isn't always feasible, and that requires machinery and permits and all these things. So finding areas maybe that are more conducive to that, or you know, the slope is a little bit better, or it's not as severely eroded.
It's Somerset Park, pretty much. Otherwise, everything's pretty steep, pretty,
There's certain areas that are along the way, but it's tough. It's tough.
so would you want to cooperate with, you've already got a relationship with the Park District. Would you want to tackle Country Garden Somerset Park?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Totally. I mean, we've been trying to do that. I don't know if you know that, about the capstone project that we received like 3 years ago?
3 or 4 years.
3 years, or maybe 4 years ago. University of Minnesota, Wisconsin at Madison granted the NRC a capstone project, which means
Yeah, I
that
saw
a senior got to come in.
But it was just a
In landscape
presentation.
architecture.
There was no-
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
presentation that the Park District initially wanted to fund, and then they brought it to the board, and it was just too expensive.
It was expensive, but it's a senior in landscape architecture, and it's his thesis project for the entire year, and he came up with this wonderful plan to naturalize that whole area. But he included some structures and gazebos and a little bit more expensive things that weren't really in the budget of the Park District. And some wonderful buffering strips, and he used all of these phytoremediator plants, and it's an amazing project.
Yeah, we'd be glad to show you the, I mean, he
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
produced a
I
book.
saw.
There's a
I-
book, yeah.
I saw his project. It was,
so how do we make that
But
project
can we-
a reality without the expensive structures and just focus on the
I
plants?
mean,
Well-
you could do everything that's there without the structures. Part of his plan called for an extension of the bike path, so that there was more access through that
That-
area. And so that would be really nice, but,
Yeah.
you know,
That's probably not gonna happen,
Right.
because neighbors will,
Yeah, but
neighbor-
even,
given the beaver thing, I don't know, neighbors
even in
will probably,
stages, you know, in stages or partially. I mean, even if you took 10 foot every couple of years and stabilized it and planted native plants along the shoreline, that does a lot, really a lot.
Well, that-
And
that would-
everything then goes downstream, you know, so.
Well, and I know that, you know, I was at a grant function a couple of years ago, and I saw that both Dana and Agnes, both of you had received a ComEd grant. And so I certainly applaud you for the effort of doing that and certainly bringing money into the community that's available, and that's certainly something we've talked about. And so I think by jointly working together, we can certainly accomplish a lot more than, you know, working independently. We, as you mentioned, we share a lot of the same goals. We've talked about in this group, you know, whether you know, it's the McDonald Creek is more important as a stormwater conveyance, storm sewer system, or the environmental impact of wanting better water quality and trying to put those two pieces together. At the end of the day, we don't have a storm sewer system for the most part in Prospect Heights, and that is our storm sewer system. But we also recognize and realize it can be an asset more than just a liability. And so certainly by replacing kind of the significantly eroded banks with native plants and trying to bring back a more natural area, I think is where our common goals align, basically. And so certainly I think I would support moving forward with trying to work, you know, more cooperatively together, you know, even for an example, cross-promoting this event, the spring cleanup. You know, it could even go a step further and trying to, you know, when a person does clean it up and trim their trees back and put it out by the street, you know, and talking to that same homeowner and say, hey, you know, there's plants available, and you know what, we even give them to you. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, how can you make it any better or any easier for a resident? Certainly, you know, I'm down on the southern part of it where the creek is much deeper, and it might not be conducive for these types of plants now, but, you know, we know there's other sections of the creek that are more conducive for it, and that's where you're the experts, and so certainly would welcome that help myself.
Yeah.
you don't have access to
And-
hackberry sprouts, do you?
To which?
Have any hackberry saplings?
we do have very,
But not that we're growing, but
Not
we
that
have
we're growing. We have-
saplings
yeah,
in
we
certain
have some,
areas.
we still have all those shrubs that are.
Buttonbush?
We have a few
green.
shrubs.
Yeah.
We grow things like incrementally when we get them. Like one year, we were donated by Fermilab hazelnuts. And then Peter grew all of the hazelnuts in his basement. And so we had like 600 hazelnuts.
That's
Wow.
Geez,
Yeah.
those are hard to grow.
It's really great. So we come by certain things, and then we have them sort of in mass, and then sometimes we don't. We have probably a couple of the hackberries, though. And we have some shrubs. We have a lot of native shrubs, actually, that were donated from Oakton Community College. So we do have a lot of native shrubs.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of stuff.
We're willing to
We
give
have,
them because we
yeah.
can't, sometimes we can't even plant them all out, or we can't even, you know, so we're willing to give them because that's part of like our vision, you know, to make Prospect Heights just a better place. And so we're willing to help in any way. And I did want to mention that ComEd grant is a great starter grant, and it's something I think that you guys should really consider. And it's a match grant, so you ask anybody to match that, whether it's the city, park district, or together. The more people you have involved and the more sort of,
Hasn't, you've already matched with the Park District and the city on that, is
Right.
it?
Twice.
So are
We actually-
we matched out?
Yeah, we were looking to do another grant because ComEd asked us to submit again, and there was no take on.
they've changed the rules. So before it was that only one organization can, but you can do it after 2 years, and now there's no rules like that, so we could apply for
And that's
So you
the
can't
open
match
lands
again?
one?
Yeah.
Is that the
Yes, the
open
open
lands?
lands
that's
one. And you can ask for any amount of funding. It doesn't have to be the full $20,000. It's up to $20,000. So any project that you see that you need, you ask whatever entity for, let's say, 2,000, and ComEd will match the 2,000. And it's a great starter grant.
The problem is getting someone.
Problem is.
Right,
to
getting someone
match.
to match.
Well, we can get a few different people to match, then we can really
Well, it has
maximize.
to-
You know, we want to go for the
It
full
has,
20.
it has to be doesn't it have to be a city or?
A city,
a
park district, it has to be.
municipality
Yeah,
or
so get a little bit from each,
City.
pool it
Exactly.
together, and that's
Exactly,
our
and especially
match.
since you're a newer organization, they may be more willing to provide that match grant for you.
Would, hmm?
I think that because you're a newer organization, they would be willing to provide a match grant for you.
The city?
I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I would think so.
Interesting.
But it's a great starter grant. Unfortunately, the deadline for application for this year was March
Yeah,
15th,
that
but
was
for next year, I mean, it's plenty of time to think of a project, to,
I did look at it, but I didn't see that what we have talked about fit their criteria at all.
I want somebody to think
So,
about. I think
yeah.
it's a grant that's easier to get than most.
Mhm.
It's a great community grant and a great starter grant, so.
But, well,
What
Well, then-
oversight, question, what oversight does the city have over your commission?
We report to them when they ask us to.
Okay, otherwise you're pretty independent.
Yeah, we're pretty independent. But
Over
we
the
keep them
years.
We keep them apprised of what we're doing.
Right, they know what
Um,
we're doing at all times, so
Like all of
anytime.
our, yeah, all of our burns, for instance, we get the EPA permits, we work with the fire department, we work with the police department, the city, we do reverse 911 calls, so there's a lot of interaction there.
And of course,
back and forth.
initially, we presented, we made a presentation to council about the importance of burning and got all of their approval first for that first burn, and then subsequently, it was just easier to get an approval and from the fire department, so everybody's involved. Everybody's involved, everybody knows, everybody approved it, and everybody,
There's
so.
also, we submitted 2-3 years ago now, a master plan for each of the projects that goes through what's going to happen at what period of time, the maintenance that we do annually and all that. So that's on record. What else did we do? We give presentations to them on the state of the prairie, for instance, over the comment prairie.
And I think it's grown over the years, and as each project was added, they became, the project started, and then we told them everything we were doing, and then slowly it just sort of morphed into, well, this is what we do every year. And so they don't ask it as much, they ask for a report, but basically they know what we're doing out there all the time. That doesn't usually change.
A lot of that is that information is provided through the newsletter. It's also provided, they know what we're doing all the time because they get the workday notices, they get the journals, and so if you want to find out what we're doing, read it. I mean, it's very transparent. So.
Well, and what I'll say is, I'm a property owner that abuts the ComEd Prairie or whatever, and so certainly, I've moved to Prospect Heights about 5 or 6 years ago, and that was one of the things that I picked up on early is there's somebody that comes along and checks the ComEd Prairie land, and that's kind of unusual or whatever, and so it took me a little while to kind of figure out what was going on, and so certainly I think that the point is that I think a lot of residents see you out there doing stuff, probably even much larger than your mailing list that you have, that somebody's kind of checking on the native grasses, and there's a particular time it's mowed and not mowed and so forth, and so.
Yeah, we also, when we're out on sites, if there are residents there, or it doesn't matter where they're from, or the people going by, we'll try to engage them. The more people that know about what you're doing and why you're doing
Right.
it, information is king. I mean, you can't have enough of it.
Yep.
It's better if it comes from you because then it doesn't get misinterpreted, so.
I think that's a lesson that we've definitely learned, that information to everybody in the community, especially with the new projects, so everybody knows what's going on, because then we don't, sometimes if you just start working on something and maybe some of the residents in the community weren't aware of the project, it's sort of like, well, hey, nobody told us, and so that's been an important lesson for us to let everybody know.
And the same thing with getting volunteers. It's interesting, like, we just did some work on Saturday. Someone saw us doing the work on Saturday, and they joined us on Sunday for
Nice.
volunteer work.
Well, one idea that I had was that they have those little libraries along the Prospect Heights Trail now, and the ComEd thing, so somehow maybe talking to them and seeing if you can put a flyer or information about
that's a
the
great
restoration project, whether it's about your group, whether it's about the restoration project itself, I think is just one way to kind of further, so when a person's walking along and they see all this tall grass and milkweed and various native things, they're kind of like, is it just not being maintained? Educate them, you have those libraries out there, and maybe you could even do a few more libraries, and then, put your information and say, hey, if you want these native plants in your backyard, contact us, and those
That's a
type of
great
things.
idea.
So,
Yeah.
That's really great.
We just installed the first round of the interpretive signage at Marava last Sunday, and so that was part of the original grant for that project, and it just took that long to get all the signs and everything in place. So the small signs, there's 6 of them that go throughout the trail all the way up and down, across the stepping stones and all that. Then there's two big 24 by 36 signs that go at the two entrances to the nature preserve. And it tells you about the project. It gives you a map of you know, the layout of the project. It tells you where you are. It gives you all kinds of information about Comet, city, the park district, everything. So those still have to be put in. That's going to be at a later date. So.
Did most of your plugs survive, or have they been trampled?
Depends on the location.
The garbage?
80%. Certain locations, like 100%, it's great, and then other locations, I mean, sometimes even people pull it out or they'll mow it down, or depends, or it's just, yeah.
Yeah, but if you look at the, let's say, 5 years ago, it's the Hammond transformation.
Oh, right,
It's
yeah.
night and day.
Who are you working with at the park district? Just Christina, or do you work with
Christina and Dino.
the
Christina and Dino.
park supervisor?
Mhm.
Not, now, what's his name?
Dino Squires.
Dino? You go direct to Dino, or everything
either
through
one.
Christina?
Well,
Usually both.
when we correspond with them, it's usually email, and they're both copied.
Well, I think going back to that capstone study that you mentioned earlier, I mean, I think one way to approach that would be that, you know, we do break that project down, whether it's in phases, whether it's eliminating some of the more costly infrastructure improvements, as I would call it. And I think some of that's the park district and the city's responsibility, the walking path, the gazebos, and any other type of control structures. But looking at the native planting area, and perhaps we jointly work on, you know, that's something we've talked about in this group, is trying to promote that as a good creek project that would kind of, what we're hoping is that we start on the public portions of the creek and say, this is the model. And then, you know, you kind of use that for your residents and say, hey, you know, incrementally, we'd like to see you make these types of improvements to your property. But it's hard for the city to basically tell, you know, tell residents or encourage residents even to try to plant native plants and take responsibility for the creek when, you know, they're not doing the same on the public properties. And so I think that our group shares the same vision of trying to see improvements at Somerset Park, and then using that as a model so that we can get our private property owners along the creek to kind of do the same thing. Sounds like you already have the resources, a lot of the resources at least, on the knowledge, and then even some of the plants to kind of start to make this a reality. So I'd like to see us work on something towards that, to that end of looking at that plan. So I would ask that you share that capstone book or
Yes.
presentation, if you will.
Definitely. We'll email
with
it.
our group.
Yeah,
It's on email too, we have it on file, so we'll send it to.
definitely do that. We would absolutely welcome that.
Yeah,
100%.
Thank you.
I
right.
mean, if you think of all the turf grass that's there, it's sad.
Right.
That's criminal.
Are we going to get into more obstruction issues?
Beavers?
If we are planting, not keeping a wide channel and a turf grass floodplain?
Well, using Somerset Park as an example, because so much of it is turf grass,
Yeah,
it doesn't absorb.
Right, well, we had this argument with Public Works before that, but did not come out on the,
And I think it's a combination of education, public, and publicity that I like to think of it as a win-win-win. You know, win for the flooding, win for the diversity of species, win for the downstream people. You know,
Win for they don't have to maintain it anymore with mowers.
Well, there is maintenance though. There is still
Yes,
maintenance.
without doubt. But then, you know, more importantly, it opens up yet another natural area for people to experience. I mean, we do a lot of stuff, we do lots of stuff with District 31, and so
31,
Agnes,
23.
23, I'm sorry. Mine at 31. Agnes is working on a year-long project with Kelly Funk's 4th grade class, and so once a month, those kids come out, or every 2 months, whatever it is, yeah, they'll come out of the classroom and walk across the Somerset Park, and then they go into the prairie. So they're keeping journals, they're making notes, they're drawing pictures, they're collecting samples, they're doing all kinds of stuff, and they're studying prairie for the whole year. Now, these are 4th graders, and that just escalates. Next year, there'll be 5th graders and 6th graders, they'll do Make a Difference, and they'll come out and they work with
The
us.
sixth graders have a Make a Difference Day, and so they come out.
So
as
they
well.
could start doing the benthic, the sampling and stuff.
But it's a natural, Somerset, the point is Somerset is a natural laboratory for all three of those schools right there. Betsy Ross, San Sullivan, and
Yeah.
MacArthur. So, in my mind, that's a huge community.
When the
asset.
Beavers were there, we took the kids out to see them. The last couple of days that they were still there.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't really see the Beavers, but we saw the dam and the lodge and everything, so.
Well, would like to, you have the infrastructure set up already.
Yeah, we'd like to help kids in any way.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
Maybe we start with, if somebody wants to give me the information about your workday, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and
Days, it's a whole
incorporate.
week though, right? You're doing
Does
it
your,
for a week?
does your newsletter
I-
have to go out tonight?
No,
I can
Okay,
email,
I'd like to get it out tonight.
they
but,
can go out.
I can email if everybody's okay with.
I had promised Mark Roscoe that I would email this to him before we sent it out. I think the one concern that I was going to talk about under our report was is that he wants to make sure that it's not abused, and we at least address that. And I think
I
that,
did.
okay. So I would like to give him the courtesy of reviewing it before we send it out, but certainly I think in the next day or two, today's Tuesday, so I mean, hopefully by Wednesday, I can push him to see if we can get his approval on it tomorrow, maybe we can send it out tomorrow or something, but,
What's your publication schedule?
Well, typically, I'd like to get it out by the end of the month.
Sure.
The journal, but the Earth Week festivities, that's, that'll come out, or that'll be like a workday notice, it'll be a special announcement. And so that will feature all of the events of the week. But this journal also does that this time, so it's going out as the first announcement. And we do that like with the Nature Speaks program, it'll be always in the journal, but then as we get closer to the event, we send out special notices to remind people again and again and again. So that's proven to be a pretty effective tactic, so.
Is there any way that we know how many people actually look at our websites?
Yeah, sure, we have the analytics. We'll get, typically, out of the 300, we'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 90 people open and read the journal.
Your website is not the city website.
No.
There's a
No, I
separate-
understand, but I'm trying to get a feel of what the residents of the city actually do when it comes to the website, whether it's your website or look at the city's website, and how many people, let's say, would be looking at this meeting online.
Right.
Personally, I don't have any information to let us know, are we being effective? Is there something we should do or change to try to get more people involved?
Yeah.
What do we need to do?
I think, what we've done is just adopted a comprehensive strategy of doing absolutely everything. You can't rely on any one thing to get the message out there. You have to be, promoting all the time. We have analytics on our website, so I can go in and look and see which pages have been viewed. If people have clicked, I can see what they clicked on and where it went to. So we have all that. And then with the email, we also have recall on that too, so we can see who's opened the email, how many times they clicked on it, did they click any links, how many times did they open it. So we have all that analytics.
Because that kind of gives you a direction as to
Correct.
where you should be putting your efforts.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, in a certain respect, you can start to tailor your content to,
Yes.
who's viewing it as well, so.
Is this
But
your
it
area
takes up
expertise?
all that stuff.
Well, this is kind of what I was looking for as far as us, let's say, having you take this information, put it on, and then we get some feedback. How many people are looking at it? Do we need to go knock on doors? At what
I'm not
point, what do we
sure.
need to do?
The knock-on-door stuff is rough, because most people
But-
won't answer the door.
Yes.
Yeah, we found
You're
Right.
selling something, or you're religious fanatics.
But a letter from the city works, and especially if you have a situation where you're really targeting people living alongside of the creek, because I think you are for that cleanup, then that might be something to consider, because I don't know how many people are on our list that actually live right there that are gonna be doing creek cleanup.
We have done a mailing just to those people. It's about 120.
Right.
Okay. Maybe mailing a letter would be,
With a
people-
smile.
Yeah,
I
if
see.
people are willing to open the
Okay.
door and talk.
Targeted based on,
on whatever.
What interest they sign up? By geography he has?
I believe that's the
So-
way it goes.
Wow.
at least for prescribed burns, he can target the houses around the area that we're burning and do the 911 call, so.
Gotcha.
oh, God, yes.
So he may be able to, and I'm not sure, but he may be able to target people living along the creek and be able to send a letter or a notice from you.
Different, see, why don't you develop?
And I don't think it's that expensive of a mailing, because I think that, that's something I consider to get it more out.
So,
So that you.
bottom line is we're totally willing to work with you guys, and totally
Help you in any
help
way.
you in any way possible.
Thank
That
you.
would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
you.
Any questions?
We will get you some information on the creek, the cleanup weekends, as soon as we've got it
I will send it
finalized.
to,
I can give you this now.
The other thing we do is we can also send out a workday notice.
Yeah, yeah,
Specifically for this
Yeah,
the same.
volunteer base.
so that if
See
they
if we
need
can
help,
get-
That's a good idea.
Do you have to have a copy of the brochure that we have?
You would probably rather have that digital, wouldn't you?
yeah, we'll follow up.
Well, yeah,
We'll follow
I
up
can
both.
send
Yeah,
that
you can take
digital.
that. We'll-
Yeah, the-
We'll
and
follow
when
up
we're
with both
talking
of them
about If you
electronically.
can't walk under thing, there's some illustrations on the back that may be helpful there.
All right, cool.
Okay, Dana, it's, I forgot your email. It's
GIOTT.
Giotto, that's
Yeah,
it.
Giotto, Ferdinand, at Gmail. Okay? Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Good luck
much.
tomorrow.
Okay,
See you later.
Thank you.
So the rest of the agenda is basically this cleanup week.
You want to know, just this whole thing for the book, the new book called The Green Book.
Get approval for the flyer from,
Did they ever produce it?
Mark,
I think so.
and I
can send
appreciate you
it.
adding that.
It looks like when you read
That
this,
should
this
work.
is other than organizations.
maybe,
it looks like
I should
it's
make it
pretty
bigger.
much
I mean, I
Same.
mean, I can give
All
him.
right, these are, they say the
Except
same
everything's
thing.
advanced.
Just,
Yeah,
On
and
sediment
that was
and
the whole
everything.
point, in other words,
Okay,
I don't know if one's.
You know, when we're talking
up-
about-
out more than another.
stream maintenance.
and I don't know if they do postcards.
Potential ordinances,
I know we do.
and how that all came about when you start looking
Yeah.
at what we were just
Oh, yeah.
60 years ago.
Oh, even,
It
yeah.
was all farmland. I remember when
I
I moved in
know.
70, we still had horses out there.
Modified
And
or
barn.
whatever,
I told you, when we moved into the house, the creek dried up.
Yeah.
I have the most beautiful
That might be a
pictures in the
little
winter,
cheaper than.
and if
the-
it was
A letter,
Letter.
47
I can
South.
step across.
It may not be, if it's the same price, then I think. we
I
can
said
add
one
it.
of these days I want to sit down with all my
But this
photographs.
almost-
Well, we already
How
sent
to
it,
do it.
I mean, to the
Exactly.
same people.
This is way back in 19, when? This was a meeting in 19, no,
No, well,
78 or 9,
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
right? And we didn't become
Yeah,
a
I'd
city
have to have
until
it
what,
printed
80,
again. 'cause it's
81?
folded and stuff, so I
I've
have
got
to-
printed, if you're gonna print the letters,
Before
just
that.
print another copy of the book too. You just say, put the two of these in there. I'll ask him.
I don't know that he can do the fold.
Do the
I mean,
folds and
read
stuff.
it and do all the fold.
Oh,
Now,
paper folder
when we
here.
moved in,
I don't, so imagine the city does, do you?
Yeah, I mean, you'd think they would, every office does these days.
Does he? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, does our, I don't know that my copy is folded.
Yeah, you should do a trifold. Yeah, if you have one of those Conica Minoltas, we
It'll,
even have
it'll
a,
do that?
we've got a folder, a stuffer and sealer and everything. It's just kind of an automated process and, I probably don't
Okay.
do as much.
no, this is very interesting,
Hey,
very interesting.
I-
I think everybody should
I'll
have a
ask
copy
Peter
of this.
or if you want to ask Peter either way.
Well, do you
No, I
want
would
to
like
put less
to have-
information? I mean, if you were on a postcard, then we just want to put kind of.
You could still fit all
basic
the same
thing.
information on there, yeah.
Not to
I
be
mean,
going their direction,
Yeah.
you know how I feel.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they're not getting the amount of support that actually supports.
Yeah, I just, you know,
So I changed it from a week to just the weekends.
Starting to make-
Ooh, print a sheet. This is the better one.
But
You
we
know
stopped.
what? This is a good one.
Because they would say they would just pick up on Mondays, right?
I mean, it depends on how much it is. I mean, they may not get to it in one day, you know, so if everybody puts it out. Right, I mean, so
Does
I mean,
he-
I don't think, I mean, I guess we could just leave it open for the whole weeks, you know, and let a person
Yeah.
do it
Well,
whenever
it
they
has to
want.
be after 1988, because we're talking
Oh,
about
oh,
88
People
revision.
can do it whenever they want to. I just-
When did our
if you
good old
spread it
Creek
out too long.
committee
then-
start?
Then you drag it out in June.
Well, no, I mean, you can't say, you know,
Well,
An ad hoc
1981
committee, we
edition.
were basically,
if everybody's
Yeah,
doing
I
it at the
started
same
the city.
time,
We
you
were
get
doing it
more
before we
did.
energy.
Right, well, I
So
mean, maybe we
Through the
do.
DHIA.
when I came
you
on
know,
board,
Starting on the 27th through the 5th with
would have been after the 100-year flood.
volunteers,
After
available on the
1987 or
weekend.
before 87?
27.
Had to be
no, it
before.
was, we were at the city before 87.
Yeah, we
That's the
were,
way to-
but the committee that
I
I
did
was
pull a
on,
list.
Oh, yeah, no,
A
I-
list of some of the
way before
landscapers
that,
in
too.
town.
so I
Some
must
are,
have come
one of
on
them's right down by Frank Anemone Landscaping at Camp McDonald and Wolf.
That
I
is
see
so
his
certain.
name around.
Oh, yeah, I hear
You
him
know
all,
him?
I hear him all weekend.
Oh, do
Chipping
you?
hogs.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that was his name, but now I do.
So
yeah,
would he
there's a
be,
couple of
would he be
landscapers.
one to contact or
I don't see
is
why
this
not.
helping
I
out?
mean, he's right here and he
When
doesn't
you never
necessarily,
walk it anywhere, we have a bunch of young,
go up to the creek, but I mean, he's part of the community and
their cameras.
hopefully he would support it, I guess.
There's a couple in my neighborhood.
That maple tree on,
I think we may be running out of time.
ends up slanted so
Well,
or going into the water. I'm calm.
What did you see?
Well, I was
all-
just gonna ask if they
You
would
what?
participate, maybe
If that
just
big
for an
one.
hour or so.
That's what-
In their
Okay,
neighborhood, in that
volunteer.
neighborhood, just come
Okay.
park their truck, bring their chainsaw, and if somebody needs a little help,
And what,
and pass out their business
Right,
cards.
okay. No, I didn't know if we were gonna put anything on the
Doing
flyer,
anything, it's
but if we're not putting anything on the flyer
No,
about
I
it,
would
this is
just,
something we're
yeah, I
working
would
out, yeah,
just
absolutely.
ask if
Right.
they would participate by just sort of volunteering out.
Yeah, I'm not ready
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that on my body right
Some
now.
of them live close by.
Yeah.
That would make my
neighbor
legs straighten up.
is a Pretty big landscape.
This looks good. I just
Yeah.
have trouble with this,
Maybe.
this,
But, you know,
north of Palatine and south of
talk
Palatine.
to him and see if he can,
Because the creek itself
it's just
does not
volunteers
run
that
parallel to
tease.
Palatine.
yeah.
It
It
does
runs.
after it crosses.
Because if people
Yeah, but
actually
crosses
start,
where?
on the side
Palatine's
of
a big road.
Show, no,
Yeah,
it
I'll
cro-
take
the
it up.
creek crosses
I'll
Palatine,
second.
you're looking at, where Schoenbeck,
See if it's the same.
you know where the church is down there?
Yeah, right there.
Where the,
He's
where
actually
the,
Then
got
it
a
makes the
website.
big curve.
Just,
yeah, then it goes under Palatine Road and makes an immediate left.
Yeah, big curve down south.
Going south, and that's where the school district, all that property up there ends up draining down.
Into the creek.
Yeah,
How much erosion is, I need to go take another look, because it's been too many years.
it does this.
Yeah.
Okay, and then here's Schoenbeck, and then the piping comes down
does this fit with what Mark,
here, and this is where,
what you talked to Mark
or the
about?
piping, when it comes in, is at the wrong angle,
Yeah.
and it fights
yeah, I
the
think the
water.
only concern that he
flow
had was
coming
just.
that way.
That's what's happening
You
right
know,
in my
he thought
place.
that doing
Yeah.
it
From Cameron,
on
they
Easter
put in this
weekend,
huge-
Right, he was right, as I was looking
Right.
at the calendar, it's also.
But they didn't angle it.
Passover.
Oh, no. No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, we're
No, no,
not
would it
in a
follow?
meeting. We haven't been called to order. We're chatting.
We'll bring it back around.
Yeah, we changed the dates on this cleanup weekends because that hit Passover and Easter the first weekend, which noticed that doing this.
So what dates
And
now?
and Mr. Roscoe wanted to split it up north and south Palatine Road.
The
Okay.
27th,
Weekends.
28th, and the 4th and the 5th.
This is the
Yes, this
correct
is the
one.
corrected one.
Well, they're the same, they're just a different format, but yes,
Okay.
corrected, new.
But those are the
Okay.
corrected dates.
Okay.
Those are the good
Good
dates,
dates.
yeah.
Okay.
One reason for doing it this way is because I think usually the end of April, that last weekend, they have a Backbones 5K in the Country Gardens, which, just to avoid that.
Okay.
So that's why
May I have a copy, please?
didn't I give you two copies?
No, well,
I was,
the guy sitting next to me took it.
Okay.
I'm used to cleanup, so I just gather everything that's around.
So I will send this to Mark and Peter tomorrow, if that's, any additions, corrections you want on it? Maybe I should highlight this a little more.
Yeah, I think that putting
Okay.
it in bold, or if it's already in bold, underlining it, I think the City of Prospect Heights website could just be an actual URL, kind of like you have up here, so it'd just be, the actual Prospect
okay.
Heights dash.org. And that way, when they get it, the Natural Resource Commission gets it, they're gonna be sending it out. I didn't understand, are they sending out their journal electronically, or?
They send it out electronic.
Yes.
Right, so that way
Yes.
that'll be a hot link that they can click.
Okay,
And take them right to the website or whatever.
okay. Anything,
We talked
if
about
we can-
we talked about the brochure. I think that, if we are gonna send a letter in an envelope, then I think we could at least ask Peter how hard it is, to just include another copy of that brochure.
How
Oh,
would you
yes.
turn this into a postcard? Take the picture out, take the photo out?
I think you could still fit all this on a postcard. I was looking for a recent postcard that I had done with,
You
a
mean
lot
like
of
a
a half page, so,
Page.
what would that be, 8.5 by 5.5, is a common size
as long as we,
postcard.
as long as we send it out after the election, so it doesn't get
Yeah,
confused.
that's true. Yes, it's just like the election ones you've seen.
Right.
That's what you had in mind, okay.
Actually, that's a good idea.
Maybe they can
With
get a
the
discount
postcard.
right after election.
Right.
No,
season.
Would you want to double it then if you're going to put the brochure in there?
Oh,
So
no,
you
if we
do a-
send a postcard.
No, I think a
we-
postcard would be without the brochure.
Right.
Well, I understood that, but if you're going to send again a new copy, or that was a side-by comment,
If
You-
we're gonna do a letter, then I think we should include the brochure. If they wanna do a postcard to
Okay,
save money or.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Because Kathy reminded me that we had sent everybody a copy of the brochure about 4 months ago or 6 months ago.
Yeah. Okay.
looking forward, I would say that
And should
this
be
first,
on the website.
We don't know.
Commission, the art page on the website,
Okay.
as opposed to just the City of Prospect Heights. It should go right to the McDonald Creek, because it says basically the best practices and stuff. So that way, you get to the home page and you're like, well, I don't see anything, take it right
Right,
to the.
right.
That's it.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
so looking forward, I would say this cleanup right now is good. The only difficulty will be that not much growth has happened. And so
That's
we
good.
need to look forward to another one, say in August and September.
Well, you
when
wanna
all
do
the
it when
growth
the
comes
growth is
down
not
over-
there.
I'm sorry,
You want to do it when the growth is not there.
a lot of people don't know what it is there that grows. In
Yeah.
other words, they look at the creek from their house and they don't see it. Because at the time of growth, everything after it grows is down like this. And so it's difficult with the long length of properties. They don't really even see the creek. I know down in our area, I know that really is true. But when the obstructions will be happening, or the stuff coming into the creek, that's when after the full growth has happened.
We opened that door when we met with Mark about wanting two of these a year, one in the spring, potentially one in the fall. And so we just said that let's try it, let's try this first
Okay,
one.
good.
What we're hoping is that we're gonna have such a high participation rate that next time he says, no, it's gotta take a month if we're gonna do the city in 4 sections, because we're gonna have that much participation. And so, but I think just to kind of see how it goes on the first one, we're gonna start with the spring one, and then if it goes well, then we'll try to do
Sure,
something
good,
similarly or differently, for a fall one, and then kind of go from there. So we have at least opened that discussion already.
It's a big responsibility for Public Works because of the length of the creek and the number
Would-
of properties on it. So it will be up to them pretty much to give us some advice on whether they can handle it.
Yeah.
Well, would it be helpful for us to drive the streets on late Sunday afternoon and take note of where there's stuff to pick up?
What Mark said is that he's got people working all you know, all weekend anyway, and so and he lives right here in the community. I think he'll get a pretty good idea on it. As it gets closer, I can talk to him to see what we can do to help his department. But he seemed to think,
Right,
to
he's
tell
got it
me.
under control, I think, in his mind.
Okay.
I'm sure he does.
Okay. What are we doing other than sending out information? Anything?
It's a good question. I think we should, I told him that we would be out there to help anybody that needed help somehow. If it's whatever, we do the south end first, we'll be there somehow. I mean, I think we have to, as being not part of the Creek Commission, even if we do nothing, we should, or don't help, and there's nothing for us to do, but we should be there.
So are we divvying up blocks here? I mean, you all live south of Palatine, but you're all in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's true.
Well, let's
We'll get it
let's see
cleaned up.
where this the Natural Resource Commission goes. I mean, ideally, if we can get some volunteers from that group as well, or some interest at least, maybe it's not as much of a burden as it could be, or so to speak. And then, we each take a block, like you're saying, or something, and we partner with one of the volunteers from that group, and we just kind of walk the creek and make ourselves available for somebody that would need it or something. So.
Does everybody have tools, loppers, saws, bow saws to
Body?
actually help?
Yeah.
Okay. I have some trash pickers I can, I guess I should borrow, so we can spread around. I mean, they were just to help. There's a lot of bags and various other crap. I think my hip waders are deteriorated too much.
Well, it's supposed to be it is supposed to be a wet spring this year, and so, they are talking about flooding, throughout the, Mississippi watershed, which would include the Des Plaines River.
Yes.
How far it makes it, as time will tell, but I think that we at least need to keep that in mind. There's a good possibility that the creek could be at higher levels than normal, a month from now when we do this, but what that means or what the impact of that is I honestly don't know, but that's at least something to.
Yeah.
So your hip waders may not be tall enough, I guess is where I was going with that.
Yeah. Boats aren't an option.
Yeah, and like I was talking at the last meeting, as far as monitoring goes, we need to somehow get residents along the creek, not just in certain areas, but the entire creek. Especially when we identify the areas that the Public Works is, and the former McDonald Creek Improvement Committee identified as critical areas. It's for somebody to kind of monitor that. Because as we see the flows in minor rainfalls jump, okay, to establish here's what's normal. We have a half-inch rainfall over a couple hours. This is what I would expect to see. And all of a sudden, if that changes, then that means we have a problem. And then we can start to concentrate our efforts on trying to locate where that problem may be. It's no different than when this entire thing started with the urbanization of the areas and then having to come with the detention control requirements, which then kind of establish, here's the flooding. So once we put in the detention requirements for any new developments, this is now when we put in projects to try to minimize flooding, to keep that stable, we have to start to monitor that nothing else happens.
Do you have a plan to find these residents?
Well, that's why when we're talking with the group that was here, as far as we need the public for us to put it out. When you're talking about a brochure, how about the Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts going around and passing it around, talking to people?
We had that experience already of being shut down, trying to pass something out, and we were roundly scolded.
Well, I'm open to any suggestions. I'm just saying, we need to try to find a way.
Well, I thought the way when we talked about it last time, we decided that probably not relying on human analysis of the creek, but rather trying to focus on some type of more devices.
That would be
you
fine,
know,
yeah.
I think that's, at least I think we'd explore that option. You know, and it sounds like, you know, for example, when Rick and I met with Mark, he was talking about the large storm sewer project that we had heard about, Kathy and I, the night that we did the presentation to the board. The board approved an engineering, I believe they approved an engineering design for a new storm sewer that's west of 12, that they
Yeah.
want to basically ultimately upsize the sewer pipes and bring it to the creek. And the point is that Mark talked about that is supposed to rise, potentially could rise the creek by 1/10 of an inch.
Right.
That was the number that he used. And so, obviously, somebody has scientific data or calculations on what the elevation of the creek normally is, how much volume the creek carries, and then if you put in X amount of acre feet of water, that the creek is gonna rise 1/10 of an inch. So I think if we can somehow or if we understand what we're looking for, meaning that once we figure out the points that you're talking, Hart, where the problematic areas are, and ask Mark if he can have, if we can, you know, understand, is there a rain, not a rain gauge, but a flow gauge, a water level gauge, things like that that could be placed at that. I think that's the most appropriate way. To rely on human.
That's fine. That's
Human is too
no,
unreliable.
no,
I have WRD data on McDonald Creek, the high point, you know, the highest levels since in the last 20 years or whatever. I've
I know,
got
but
that
that's
data.
usually from the one gauging station downstream. We don't have enough, for
one
example, like, the effect of Lake Arlington as it discharges itself right there, you know, across Schoenbeck Road. What's that what's normal? I have no clue.
Well, nothing is normal anymore.
Well, and honestly, Art, I think Mark shares that same concern that you do. You know, he talked about his anxiety, if I can say it that way, about the Lake Arlington and, you know, having to go and check himself to see whether or not the floodgates were closed when they were supposed to be, to control the creek or whatever.
Right.
And so, you know, I think you're right that, you know, most of the geological, who's the National Geological Survey.
Yeah, USGS.
USGS, that most of their rain gauges are on the Des Plaines River, and they have a couple that are along McDonald Creek. I think the furthest one north that I'm aware of is the one under Camp McDonald Bridge. And so perhaps it's talking about
I
adding
think they might have one in Cornell.
one on Cornell. So adding a few more along the creek, I think, is what you're talking. That would give us more data. And for example, that beaver situation that came up, if we had enough gauges, you would have seen that on this side of the beaver dam or the beaver thing, that the elevation is at 642, and on this side it's 645. Obviously, it changed the elevation by 3 feet because this side is normally 642 or
Yes.
643 maybe or whatever. So, you know, that's the advantages of, and that's what the city could use to justify why they removed it, or why they didn't need to be concerned about it if that's their desire. You know, so I think that's where I thought we had left it, and I think.
The USGA, the US?
GS.
Geological Survey.
Yes, they have a ton of information that I think might also include the sediment rise and fall. They're the ones that have walked the creek many times. They're the ones that found the beaver dam on the south. They probably may have a lot of information because the gauge is right there, which they are gauging that water flow, and they have been there more often. I'm surprised, but maybe it's because of the potential flooding of the Des Plaines. They were there again this week.
And then that's who?
The United States,
US Geological Survey.
yes, and they're the ones that monitor the creek and its flow, and have, many years ago, when there was an issue, the fellow said he would even come to the creek committee and give if we needed him, they could be called.
They have, their data is publicly available, but I'm not sure how current.
Well, it's real time.
It's real
The
time.
rain gauges are in real time. I've used those before. The elevation is, you know, I don't know what other attributes that they're picking up by that device or whatever. But certainly the water elevation is like every 5 minutes or 15 minutes, something like that.
And the depth. They're getting the depth and
Okay. So we need to combine that with a rainfall gauge, so we. Is that just a matter of sticking the tube out in your backyard?
They, honestly, they probably, I mean, I think what a lot of those things do is they just go to the local airports, and so we
The
have
airport and
the
use
airport.
whatever they,
Yeah,
okay.
because the rain
Rain.
shouldn't be a huge difference,
Right.
you know, they kind of has strategic
it's not on.
locations for those,
This is very
some of the
interesting.
attributes.
Okay. I may have some of
Yeah,
that
it says a lot.
already.
It sure does.
I will see if I
Gives
can
you a pretty good
put it
history.
together.
Mhm.
One, you can keep it.
Yeah, but that's only page 4.
Anything else on this cleanup week? Does anybody have any contact or connections with Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or any
No, ma'am.
other organizations? I am far removed from schools.
Yeah.
Okay. Beyond the cleanup week, is there-
Our next meeting?
do you want to participate in the looking ahead in summer events like the block party, or? I'm not particularly inclined to be in the 4th of July parade, or are you? Perhaps we can coordinate with Natural Resources
Yes.
on that.
On the block party?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sure. I'll be there.
actually, I have a wedding that weekend, so I won't be.
When is it?
That leaves you last weekend of June. So, anybody,
If I may back up to the Public Works update, I mean, one of the things that I took away from the meeting with Mark Roscoe is that the McDonald Creek is not his only flooding area of concern in the city. One of the issues that I was not aware of, at least, was about the flooding along the Des Plaines River behind the levee. So basically east of Wolf Road, that area has some significant flooding. Realistically, probably more significant property damage and flooding than.
since they finished the levee though?
Yes.
Okay.
There was a design flaw in the levee, and there's a reason why they have all the temporary portable pumps
Pumps.
sitting next to the levee wall.
Yes.
Apparently, some of the pumps were undersized at the time and apparently don't have the capacity for what they need to be. And so certainly, he was describing the event, I don't remember exactly when it took place, if this was last year in July when
Yeah,
we had the
big,
flooding.
yeah, right.
But he was talking numbers of 30-plus vehicles that were underwater, and,
Aren't those mostly in Mount Prospect,
no, these,
just a little further south?
No, this
this
is-
is all Prospect Heights, the apartment.
Apartment complex.
Yeah,
Right,
apartments and
and
condos over
so
there.
the point was is that, certainly some significant flooding areas outside of the McDonald Creek area. And it does sound like he has some direction and funding to move forward with some of those concerns. We also talked about the one I mentioned earlier, about the one west of 12. So certainly the point was is that the city and Mark is tasked with some responsibilities outside of the creek, and I guess, when I looked at kind of our mission and goal, I kind of assumed for the most part that the majority of Prospect Heights drains into McDonald Creek, and probably a majority, but there is certainly significant other challenges that he's tasked with, if I can say it that way, that he is trying to address. And I think, just to reiterate what I said at the last meeting, I think there's a reason why we see, both mayoral candidates are talking stormwater as one of their key platforms in the postcards that we get. And so certainly I think there is probably I don't know if it's a new, I haven't been in Prospect Heights that long, but certainly there is some recognition of the problems that we face as a community as far as flooding concerns go, so.
What I don't see is any of them addressing the true cause of the flooding, which is pavement everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're
Right.
they're allowing bigger and bigger houses to be built on the same lots. So all they're addressing is how to get the water into the creek faster, not how to stop so much water.
Well, and that's where, I think what we talked about at a previous meeting is that's where I think we can provide some recommendations and solutions to the staff to say, hey, let's have some incentives for best practices, rain gardens and pervious pavement or permeable pavement and things like that. So
Look at the picture a little more, the whole picture, not just the, anyway. So it's a little disappointing to see that none of them are talking about any of that.
Well, I mean,
Some
the
real
devil's in the details,
suggestions.
as they say.
Yes, I understand Mark has the key to the levee gates over there, but I did not realize that it wasn't fully functioning after the millions of dollars in 2-3 years they've spent building it.
That's our
Isn't
federal,
this
that's Army Corps, that's
Isn't
federal
this
government for you.
MWRD and Army Corps, aren't they completely responsible for this?
I mean, it does sound like there's a solution in the works.
Right,
and-
they're
and-
working on that.
In the
and it does-
meantime, he's holding his breath against another big storm.
Right. And as I mentioned, Lake Arlington certainly gives him some anxiety, it sounds like as well. It's more than, it sounds like it has some type of manual floodgates or manual operation that would allow you to control the water levels and whether, and so certainly concerns about whether or not that's functioning, so.
Who controls that? Arlington Heights?
Arlington Heights, and it sounds like he may have a key, or at least, he at least knows when it should be, when it shouldn't be open. And so certainly, I think that, he's, when the level's high, that's where he goes to check to make sure everything's the way it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Whether it's open, closed, partially open, I don't know all the specifics of it, but,
There's a lot of capacity at Lake Arlington. I've never seen it come up as high as the path. Even last year in July, it was pretty flooded. Some picnic benches were underwater and stuff, and yet there still was plenty of capacity, it
Capacity.
seemed like, before it got anywhere near any homes.
and that's probably by design, just that somebody decides that I don't want it within 10 feet of the top of the thing, and so I'm gonna start to open it, and, that obviously has negative impacts downstream, and so perhaps there should be, I don't, without, knowing how it functions, I'm not gonna, propose to have a solution, but, certainly I think that, everybody would say, let's take it all the way to capacity if somebody downstream is already flooding. Having said that, we saw that in the last week with what they were doing along the Missouri River up and down Nebraska and Iowa and South Dakota, the Army Corps was deciding when you let the levee
Right,
go
yeah.
before it actually physically fails, and that, yes, it's gonna mean that somebody's gonna flood.
They did that a couple of years ago along the Missouri too, didn't they? Take levees down. The last big flood, they were taking levees down in order to prevent, they were choosing to flood this
Right,
instead of that.
right. Yeah, and I can't imagine anybody would want that responsibility or that decision to make, but certainly I think that's just that's the nature of the urban environment that we live in.
Do we know who controls Lake Arlington?
I don't know for certain, no. That would probably have to be a follow-up question to Mark, to get clarity to it, but I gathered it wasn't Prospect Heights, it was either MWRD's, Arlington Heights, or somebody else.
Yeah.
An agreement
Hmm.
with us too.
Interesting. Well, maybe
I
that's
think
something
there
we
was
can
some
find
money.
out.
I don't know for sure.
Prospect Heights contributed to building it, yes.
Yes, and they were involved with some of the designing.
And is this control an actual manual go down to the lake and turn a valve, or is this all?
I'm sure it's probably
Because I've
has-
never seen anything that looks like that there, but,
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably automatic where it's telemetry from a computer.
This was built in the, like, around 86, 87.
Well,
so
There probably
maybe it
is still
different.
the manual wheel that you go and stand on top of a concrete thing, you turn a wheel and there's you know, like a gate valve below you that lets stuff through the concrete structure, and that's
Okay,
And
could
the-
hidden or something. but-
probably in the berm itself.
Bypass
You know, there's probably just an inlet coming in on the left side of the berm. On top of the berm, you probably don't see much at all, except a little, you might see a little hut, or you might just have an open flat thing, and then there's a wheel, and there's a gate in there that is pulled up and down by this
Off the
turning
center
wheel.
line, it's only
The
5
other
feet
side
out.
discharges, you know, to a culvert into the creek. And that's how
And it came right across
I've seen
there,
it, I
this
guess,
bypass channel.
Okay.
I've seen.
Interesting.
So, wait, you can't build a
Okay.
bypass channel.
Guess, try and find out a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah.
Anything
If you walk
else?
and look now, you might
Yeah,
see
I
things a little
don't,
bit
but
differently,
look,
I guess.
I've, you know, walked it a lot, but I've,
Do I understand that a budget for us has been approved?
a little
Or it's
bit,
been
yeah,
submitted.
they said they included something, and I did, ask for a budget, and a little bit of budget for mailing, and he said, yes, they included something, you know, like allowance for that, so.
Okay, do we have our meeting schedule?
I mean, I guess in light, if I may, before we get to the meeting, in light of the Creek Commission, or the Natural Resource Commission being here tonight, and I know there was the request from Jill to move our meeting back to 6:30. You know, I guess I would be in support of pushing the meeting back to 6:30 if nobody else has an issue with it, if it will keep her coming to the meeting and save her from having to watch the videos later. And we're talking about working cooperatively with them, I think it would be a good step to do it that way.
Yeah, I don't mind, it doesn't matter to me.
Works,
Doesn't matter.
works for me.
Sure.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
Oh, should we take a vote?
No, I think we're all in favor of it.
Oh,
Well, I just think, well,
Okay.
I don't want to make it public, but I think we do need to be careful. We do have to remember our purpose, and we have to remember that there's many areas in the city that might be able to use their help, but there's a lot of other areas in the city and this creek that need bigger help.
Right.
And so I welcome the chance to work with them. I think we have to remember what our focus is, and if they can be of assistance, we should certainly take advantage of it. And
they're just, the communications that they have set up, Dana's very good at his journal and newsletter, that's his thing, websites
And he
they have
does it
very
all
nice-
voluntarily, right?
He does a nice job
Yeah.
with it, it's consistent, he's always got good photos, and, you know, he's just,
I understand.
that's his,
I do.
his
Yeah.
thing.
I do.
So if we can just piggyback on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's appropriate.
Besides which, I'm not one to design a new mousetrap when you got an excellent one out there already. And they could probably use a little content after 5 years, sometimes they could, you know, run out of things to say. So, maybe we can work, that would be very helpful for us. All right, next meeting, probably just April, what is it, April 20?
Right before
I
the
brought
first
this
cleanup weekend.
only, I brought this only to look at the calendar. April,
23rd.
oh, it's the 22nd, it's the day after Easter, or 23rd. Is that
Fine.
everybody, and that'll be mostly just make sure we got
Everything's set
set
for
for
the,
the.
And are we gonna do it at 6:30?
yes. And are we, back to one other point on this flyer, sorry to belittle it. We had talked, maybe had a sidebar conversation down here about changing this for the whole week. Are we gonna change this from April 27th through May 5th? Or we're just gonna leave these 2 days?
What do you think? It's, we call it cleanup week, and it's actually like 10 days, and it's, people get, if you call it, if you think people will focus on the weekend, or, the other thing is if you have it all week, we're not gonna be out there to help all week.
Okay, all right, well, then leave it as it is.
Yeah, thought maybe if it's a little narrower, then if we ask some landscapers, they have a very
Yeah.
small
Yep.
window. Okay. Alrighty. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
So move.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you, Patrick.
Try to make